My name is Brent, 58 years old, a machinist who spent 35 years with calloused hands providing for my family. Never thought my own son would abandon me on that rainy highway 50 miles from home after the worst argument of our lives. Standing there watching his taillights disappear into the storm, I felt something break inside me. What I decided to do next would change everything between us. Let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button before I take you through the most heartbreaking and healing journey a father could experience. I still remember the weight of my toolbox the first day I walked into Thompson Manufacturing. Just 23 years old, fresh out of technical school, ready to build a life with my high school sweetheart, Margaret. We had dreams back then. Nothing extravagant, just a simple home, maybe a couple of kids' weekend barbecues. The American dream scaled to what felt honest and achievable. The factory floor became my second home. The rhythmic hum of machinery, the smell of metal and cutting fluid, the satisfaction of transforming raw materials into precision parts. My hands grew calloused but skilled. Every paycheck meant another brick in the foundation of our future. Jason came along 3 years later. I still remember holding him for the first time, this tiny human with Margaret's eyes and my chin. I promised him silently that I would give him everything I could. Not wealth, perhaps, but security, values, and unconditional love. For 12 years, our life was everything I had hoped for. Margaret taught kindergarten at the local elementary school. I worked my way up to senior machinist. Jason grew into a bright, curious boy who loved building model airplanes with me in the garage. We were solidly middle class, comfortable enough, rich in the ways that mattered most. Then Margaret started getting headaches. At first, we dismissed them as stress, maybe needing new glasses. By the time we got the diagnosis, aggressive brain tumor, it was already too late. 6 months. That is all the time we had left together. 6 months of hospital visits, of watching her fade, of trying to prepare Jason for a world without his mother. The night after the funeral, I found Jason in our garage smashing the model airplanes we had built together. I did not stop him. I sat down on the concrete floor beside him, and when he finally collapsed into tears, I held him. We cried together until there were no tears left. "It is just you and me now, buddy," I told him. "We are going to make it through this." And somehow we did. I arranged my shifts to be home when Jason finished school. I learned to cook more than just burgers and spaghetti. I attended parent-teacher conferences, helped with science projects, and tried my best to talk about the awkward stuff as he entered his teens. There were rough patches, of course. Nights when I would find him looking at old photos of Margaret, both of us struggling with the empty space she had left in our lives. But we had each other. For years after losing Margaret, Jason and I grew closer than most fathers and sons. He would hang around the garage while I tinkered with my old Chevy, asking questions, learning to use tools. On weekends, we would go fishing at Lake Carson. Nothing fancy about our life, but it felt whole despite our loss. Everything started changing when Jason entered high school. Suddenly, my work clothes embarrassed him when I picked him up after soccer practice. He became conscious of our modest home compared to the houses his new friends lived in. Doctors' kids, lawyers' kids. The comments started small. "Dad, why do we still have this old TV when everyone else has flat screens? Could we look at some newer model cars? Tim's dad just got him a Mustang for his birthday." I tried to explain our financial reality without burdening him. Yes, we were stable, but machinist wages only stretched so far. I was putting money aside for his college fund instead of upgrading our lifestyle. I wanted him to have opportunities I never had. The summer before his senior year, Jason got an internship at a local marketing firm through the father of one of his teammates. He came home talking about branding strategies and social media campaigns. I was proud of him for taking initiative exploring career paths that excited him. What I did not realize was how that experience was changing his perception of success and his perception of me. When Jason got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, I was ecstatic. First person in our family to go to college. The night we got the acceptance letter, I took him out for steaks to celebrate, telling him how proud his mother would have been. "I am going to make something of myself, Dad," he said across the restaurant table. There was something in his tone that caught me off guard, as if he were already separating himself from the life we had built. "You already are something, Jason," I replied. But I could tell my words did not reach him. College accelerated the changes in Jason. His first year, he still came home monthly for weekends. By sophomore year, those visits dwindled to major holidays. When he did come home, he spent most of his time texting friends or complaining about our slow internet connection. He switched his major from business to finance after meeting some students whose parents worked on Wall Street. I noticed he started wearing expensive clothes I knew he could not afford on the spending money I sent. When I asked about it, he vaguely mentioned side hustles and investment opportunities. I tried not to pry too much. He was an adult now, finding his own path. That is what parents are supposed to allow, right? The real wake-up call came during his junior year when he called asking for $3,000 for an investment opportunity. When I asked for details, he got defensive. "You would not understand, Dad. This is the kind of thing that separates people who stay middle class forever from people who actually build wealth." The comment stung, but I let it go. I told him I did not have that kind of money just sitting around, which was true. He hung up angry and did not call for nearly a month afterward. By the time he graduated, I barely recognized my son. He had adopted the vocabulary, ambitions, and judgment of a world I had never been part of. But I was still proud watching him accept his diploma, thinking of how Margaret would have beamed seeing our boy in his cap and gown. After graduation, Jason moved to the city, sharing an apartment with college friends while working at an investment firm. Our contact became increasingly sporadic. A text on birthdays, a brief call at Christmas. 8 months would pass with barely a word, which is why I was surprised when he called out of the blue saying he was coming home for the weekend. "Got something big to discuss with you, Dad," he said, an excitement in his voice I had not heard in years. When Jason pulled into our driveway in a brand new luxury sedan, I knew something was off. A car like that would cost more than I made in a year, and he had only been working at his firm for 18 months. I greeted him with a hug that he returned with one arm already looking past me into the house. "Place has not changed a bit," he said, in a tone that did not sound like a compliment. Over dinner, he talked nonstop about his job, his connections, the restaurants and clubs he frequented. I listened, trying to find glimpses of my son beneath this stranger's persona. Then he got to the reason for his visit. "I have been approached about an exclusive investment opportunity," he said, pulling out a glossy brochure for a lakeside resort development. "Pre-construction pricing, guaranteed 20% return in the first year. I need to move fast before all the units are claimed." I looked through the brochure carefully. "How much are you investing?" "That is the thing," Jason said, leaning forward. "I have most of it, but I need another 50,000 to secure the premium unit. I was hoping you could help." I nearly choked on my coffee. 50,000? Jason, I do not have that kind of money available. What about your retirement savings? You could borrow against it. This is a sure thing, Dad. As he talked more about the development, certain details raised red flags. The developer was newly formed. The promised returns seemed unrealistic, and the brochure was long on lifestyle imagery, but short on concrete financial information. "Have you visited this property?" I asked. "Not yet, but we could go tomorrow. It is about an hour-and-a-half drive. Once you see it, you will understand what an opportunity this is." Something in my gut told me this was wrong, but I agreed to go see the property. Maybe I was being too cautious. Maybe this was a legitimate opportunity. And more than anything, I wanted to spend time with my son, to try to reconnect somehow. That night, while Jason showered, I noticed his wallet on the kitchen counter. I knew I should not, but I opened it. Behind his ID was a maxed-out credit card statement showing $60,000 in debt with missed minimum payments. My heart sank. Whatever was going on with this investment, Jason was in financial trouble he was not admitting. I put the wallet back exactly as I had found it and went to bed, my mind racing with concern for my son and uncertainty about what tomorrow would bring. The next morning dawned gray and threatening rain, fitting for what would become the most painful day of my life since losing Margaret. Jason was already up when I came downstairs, dressed in what I assumed was his idea of casual business attire, designer jeans and a button-down that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "Ready to see the future, Dad?" he asked, car keys already in hand. There was something feverish about his enthusiasm that heightened my concern. I grabbed my old rain jacket from the hook by the door. Jason looked at it with barely disguised disdain. "Maybe we should get you some new clothes after this," he muttered as we headed to his car. The drive started pleasantly enough. The luxury car rode smoothly, and Jason filled the silence with stories about his colleagues and clients. I tried to find common ground, asking questions about his work, genuinely interested in understanding this world he had entered. "So this developer," I said carefully, "you have researched them thoroughly." Jason tensed slightly. "Of course, my firm has connections. This is inside track stuff not available to the general public." As we drove farther from town, the landscape opened up to rolling hills and farmland. Eventually, Jason turned onto a gravel road with a small sign reading, "Future Home of Lakeside Estates, Coming Soon." The property itself was undeveloped land with a small natural lake. A weather-beaten dock extended into the water, and a single trailer served as a makeshift sales office. No construction had begun. No infrastructure was visible. A slick-talking salesman named Gabriel greeted us unfazed by the lack of other visitors on a Saturday. He launched into a rehearsed presentation, pointing to glossy renderings of luxury cabins and amenities that existed only on paper. "The initial investors are already seeing returns," Gabriel assured us, though he became vague when I asked for specifics. While Jason was examining a site map, I quietly asked Gabriel how long the development company had been in business. "This project is their first venture in this region," he replied smoothly, avoiding a direct answer. When I inquired about permits, environmental impact studies, and construction timelines, Gabriel's answers grew increasingly evasive. Jason shot me irritated glances as I continued questioning. After 30 minutes, I had heard enough. This had all the hallmarks of a speculative venture at best, an outright scam at worst. Either way, it was no place for Jason's money, certainly not mine. As we left the trailer, the first raindrops began to fall. Jason was unusually quiet as we walked back to the car. "What did you think?" he finally asked as we pulled away. I took a deep breath. "Jason, I do not think this is legitimate. There is no actual development happening, just a lot of promises. I would not put money into this." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "You do not know what you are talking about. This is how these exclusive opportunities work." "Son, I have been around long enough to recognize when something does not add up. This feels wrong." "Because you have never taken a risk in your life," Jason snapped. "You have always played it safe, working the same boring job, living in the same small house. And where has it gotten you?" His words hit like physical blows, but I kept my voice steady. "It got us a stable home. It put food on the table. It put you through college." "The bare minimum," he scoffed. You could have done so much more if you had any ambition. Do you know how embarrassing it was telling my friends my dad is a machinist, while their parents were professionals, executives? The rain was coming down harder now, drumming on the roof of the car. I felt something breaking inside me, but I tried once more to reach him. Jason, I found the credit card statement in your wallet. I know you are in debt. Whatever is going on, we can figure it out together. But this investment is not the answer. His face went pale, then flushed with anger. You went through my wallet. Who does that? I am worried about you, son. I am not your little boy anymore, he shouted. I know what I am doing. This investment could set me up for life, but you are too small-minded to see it. Jason, please. No, I am done listening to you. You have never understood what it takes to truly succeed. Mom would have supported me. The mention of Margaret this way, as a weapon against me, was too much. Do not bring your mother into this, I said, my voice low and dangerous. She would be heartbroken seeing you chase money this way, seeing you treat people as stepping stones. Jason suddenly swerved to the shoulder of the road, gravel spraying, as the car came to an abrupt stop. The rain was now a downpour. Get out, he said, his voice ice cold. I stared at him, not comprehending. What? Get out of my car. If you think so little of me and my judgment, you can find your own way back. Jason, we are miles from anywhere. It is pouring rain. Not my problem. Get out. I looked at my son, my child whom I had raised alone for so many years, whom I had loved through grief and adolescence and beyond, and saw no recognition in his eyes, just cold fury and wounded pride. Slowly I unbuckled my seatbelt and opened the door. The rain immediately soaked through my jacket. This is not you, Jason, I said quietly. Please think about what you are doing. This is exactly who I am now, he replied. Someone who does not need you or your outdated worldview anymore. I stepped out onto the gravel shoulder. The moment the door closed behind me, Jason accelerated away, tires spitting gravel and water. I stood there, rain streaming down my face, watching the taillights of my son's car disappear around a bend in the road. In that moment, I realized I was exactly 50 miles from home, soaked to the skin, with no phone. I had left it charging in Jason's car, no nearby businesses, and only the clothes on my back. At 58 years old, I had just been abandoned by my only child on a rural road in a rainstorm. As the shock began to fade, replaced by a deep, aching pain in my chest, I did the only thing I could do. I turned in the direction of home and started walking. The first hour was the hardest. The rain continued relentlessly, soaking through my jacket and chilling me to the bone. Each car that passed without stopping was another small disappointment. I kept expecting to see Jason's car returning, his momentary anger cooled, ready to apologize. But the road remained empty except for occasional passing vehicles, their drivers barely glancing at the soaked older man trudging along the shoulder. After walking about 3 miles, I found a small covered bus stop. Just a bench and a metal roof, but it offered temporary shelter from the downpour. I sat down, water dripping from my clothes, and tried to process what had just happened. How had we come to this? What had transformed my son from the boy who once followed me around the garage, eager to learn, into a man who could leave his father stranded in a rainstorm? The pain of rejection was overwhelming, but beneath it was something else. A deep sadness for what Jason had become. I had lost my son long before today, I realized. Lost him to ambition untethered from values, to a vision of success that measured worth in dollars and status. Had I failed him somehow? Should I have pushed harder for him to maintain our connection? Had my simple life inadvertently taught him the wrong lessons? My thoughts were interrupted by the rumble of an approaching truck. It slowed as it neared the bus stop, then pulled over. The passenger window rolled down, revealing a bearded man in his 60s. "You look like you could use a ride," he called over the sound of rain. Relief washed over me. I surely could. Thank you. I climbed into the cab of the pickup, introducing myself to the driver, who said his name was Frank. The truck was old, but meticulously maintained, the dashboard adorned with a small photo of a smiling woman. "What brings you out in this weather without transportation?" Frank asked, not unkindly. I hesitated, embarrassment warming my cold cheeks. "My son and I had a disagreement. He left me to find my own way back." Frank nodded slowly, keeping his eyes on the rain-slicked road. "That is rough. How far are you heading?" "About 47 more miles," I said. "But anywhere closer to town would help." "I can take you most of the way. Got a delivery in Riverdale, which is about 30 miles from here." As we drove, Frank shared that he was a retired carpenter who now delivered custom furniture pieces for a local craftsman. The conversation flowed easily, and something about his straightforward manner made it easy to open up. "My son and I found myself saying, we have been growing apart for years. Today it just came to a breaking point." Frank was quiet for a moment. "Got a similar story with my boy Thomas. Different circumstances, but same outcome for a while there." He glanced at the photo on his dashboard. "After my wife died, Thomas went through a real rebellious phase. Blamed me for not getting her to the hospital sooner, though the doctors said it would not have mattered. One night after a particularly bad fight, he took my car without permission, crashed it while driving angry." Frank shook his head at the memory. "He walked away without a scratch, thank God, but the car was totaled. And you know what I did? Nothing. I just let him sit with what he had done. No yelling, no punishment. Just nothing." "What happened?" I asked. "He avoided me for weeks. Then one day he came to me with his paycheck from his part-time job. Said he wanted to start paying me back for the car. I told him the money was not important. What mattered was that he understood actions have consequences, and running away from problems only makes them worse." Frank turned onto a main highway before continuing. "It took time, years really, but our relationship healed. Better than before even. He learned about accountability, and I learned to let him make his own mistakes while keeping the door open." His story resonated deeply. "How did you find the strength to not lash out, to not cut him off?" I asked. Frank considered this. I realized anger would only push him further away. And underneath my hurt was love. Always love. So I chose dignity over rage, patience over punishment. Hardest thing I ever did, but the most worthwhile. By the time we reached Riverdale, the rain had stopped and watery sunlight was breaking through the clouds. As Frank pulled up to a gas station, he scribbled a number on a receipt. "My cell if you need anything else today," he said, handing it to me. "Good luck with your boy. Remember, dignity and patience. The rest will follow." I thanked him sincerely and stepped out of the truck. Standing in that gas station parking lot, still damp but no longer cold, I felt something shifting inside me. Frank's words had planted a seed. Inside the station, I used the payphone to call my old friend Harold, who agreed to drive out and pick me up. While waiting, I bought a cup of coffee and sat at a small table by the window, watching the clearing sky. For the first time since being left on that roadside, I began to think clearly about what would happen next. Jason would eventually realize what he had done. He might call to apologize, or he might double down out of pride. Either way, I needed to decide how to respond. The old me would have been waiting by the phone, ready to forgive everything the moment Jason showed any remorse. But I realize now that approach had contributed to our current situation. By never holding him accountable, by always being the one to reach out, I had enabled his worst tendencies. No, this time would be different. I would not call him. I would not chase after him. I would wait with dignity, and when he reached out, I would respond with love, but also with clear boundaries. This was not about punishment. It was about respect. For him and for myself. By the time Harold arrived in his battered Jeep, I had sketched out a rough plan. I would give Jason space to reflect on his actions. If he called to apologize, I would accept graciously, but suggest we spend some real time together. Not just a hurried visit, but days of reconnection. If he called without acknowledging what had happened, I would calmly explain that we needed to address it before moving forward. "You look like you have been through hell," Harold commented as I climbed into his Jeep. "And back," I replied. "But I think I found something important along the way." As we drove toward home, I explained what had happened. Harold, who had known Jason since he was a boy, shook his head in disbelief. "Never thought he would do something like that," he said. "What are you going to do now?" I looked out at the landscape, passing by at the rainwater, glistening in the fields, and the sunlight breaking through the clouds. "I am going to teach my son about dignity," I said. "Not by telling him, but by showing him." I returned to an empty house, half expecting to find Jason waiting, perhaps regretful, but there was no sign he had returned. His coffee cup from breakfast still sat in the sink. I picked it up, washed it carefully, and put it away. Over the next 3 days, I maintained my normal routine. I went to work, greeted my colleagues, focused on the precision parts taking shape under my hands. I shared dinner with Harold one evening, played cards with my neighbor Ted another night. To anyone watching, I was simply going about my life. Inside, I was waiting. Not passively, but with purpose. This period of silence was necessary. For Jason to reflect, for me to strengthen my resolve. I did not call him, though every fiber of my being wanted to make sure he was safe, to try to bridge the chasm between us. On the 4th day, my phone rang while I was preparing dinner. Jason's name appeared on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Jason." "Dad." His voice sounded normal, almost casual. No hint of the storm that had passed between us. "I have been thinking about that investment opportunity. I talked to some people at work, and they think it sounds solid. I was wondering if you had reconsidered." No mention of leaving me stranded. No acknowledgement of his actions. Just straight to asking for money. I kept my voice calm, neutral. "I have been thinking too, Jason. About a lot of things." "Great, so about the investment." "I cannot discuss that right now," I interrupted gently. "I think we have more important things to talk about first." A pause. "Like what?" "Like what happened 4 days ago when you left me on the roadside 50 miles from home." Another pause, longer this time. "Oh, that. Look, I was angry. You went through my personal stuff, you were questioning my judgment. I just needed some space." "I understand you were angry," I said. "But your actions had consequences. I had to find my own way back in the rain without a phone." "Dad, I am sorry if that upset you, but can we move past it? This investment opportunity is time-sensitive." His dismissive tone confirmed everything I had been thinking. This was not about the money anymore. This was about something far more fundamental. "Jason, I will help you," I said, causing a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "But I have a condition." "What condition?" He sounded instantly suspicious. "Come stay with me for a week. Just 7 days. No agenda, no pressure about investments. Just you and me reconnecting." "A week, Dad, I cannot take that much time off work." "This is important, Jason. More important than work. More important than any investment. He was quiet for several seconds. "And if I do this, you will help with the investment?" I sidestepped the direct question. "If you spend this week with me, I promise we will have an honest conversation about your financial situation and how I might be able to help." The line went silent again, and I could almost hear him calculating, weighing his options. "Fine," he finally said. "I can come this weekend, stay through next Friday, but I will need to check emails, take some calls." "That is fine," I agreed. "All I ask is that you be present when we are together." After arranging the details, we hung up. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still in my hand, feeling a strange mix of hope and apprehension. 1 week to reach my son. 1 week to try to break through the walls he had built around himself. 1 week to show him a different definition of success. The strategy was a gamble. Jason was coming for the wrong reasons. For money, not reconciliation. But sometimes getting someone in the room was the hardest part. Once he was here, maybe something could shift. 3 days later, Jason arrived, his luxury car looking out of place in our modest driveway. He brought a sleek suitcase and a laptop bag, dressed as if coming to a business casual event rather than his childhood home. His greeting was stiff, his hug perfunctory. "Your room is just as you left it," I told him as he carried his luggage inside. He glanced around the house with barely concealed judgment. "Place could use some updating, Dad." "It serves me well," I replied simply. "Are you hungry? I made lasagna." That first evening was awkward. Jason kept checking his phone, responding to texts, clearly uncomfortable with the silence that sometimes fell between us. I did not push, did not bring up the incident or the investment. Instead, I asked about his daily life in the city, his apartment, his routines. Gradually, his posture relaxed slightly as he talked about things that were safe, neutral. Before turning in, I mentioned casually, "I thought tomorrow you might come with me to the shop. Been a while since you have seen where I work." Jason frowned slightly. "Do I need to?" "I mean, I have seen it before." "Things have changed," I said, "and I would appreciate the company." He shrugged, a gesture so reminiscent of his teenage years that it nearly made me smile. "Whatever. Sure." In his reluctant agreement, I saw the first tiny opening, a hairline crack in the facade. It was enough for now. Tomorrow would bring its own opportunities. The next morning, Jason came downstairs dressed in what he clearly considered appropriate for visiting a machine shop. Crisp jeans and a button-down that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. I did not comment, just handed him a travel mug of coffee as we headed out to my truck. "We could take my car," he offered, eyeing my 15-year-old Ford. "Truck works fine," I replied. "And I might need to bring some materials home later." The 20-minute drive to Thompson Manufacturing was mostly silent. I could sense Jason's discomfort at being in the passenger seat of a vehicle he considered beneath him. As we pulled into the employee parking lot, his expression was one of resigned tolerance. "Still the same old building," he commented as we walked toward the entrance. "Outside, maybe," I acknowledged, "but a lot has changed inside." When we entered the manufacturing floor, the familiar sounds enveloped us. The rhythmic hum of CNC machines, the occasional hiss of pneumatic tools, the background din of metal on metal. I signed us both in, handing Jason a visitor badge. "Brent," called Marco, one of the floor supervisors, walking over to greet us. "And this must be Jason. Your dad talks about you all the time." Jason looked surprised as he shook Marco's hand. "He does. Sure does. Says you are killing it in finance. Come, let me show you around." As Marco led us through the facility, I watched Jason's face. His expression gradually shifted from polite disinterest to curiosity. Thompson Manufacturing had modernized significantly over the years, investing in cutting-edge equipment that Jason clearly had not expected. This 5-axis CNC machine can produce aerospace components with tolerances within 1/10,000th of an inch, Marco explained, pointing to a massive piece of equipment where I often worked. Your dad is one of the few people here qualified to program and operate it. Jason glanced at me, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. Brent, show your son what you are working on, Marco suggested before being called away to handle an issue on another line. I led Jason to my workstation, where a complex titanium component was taking shape under the precision cutting tools. I explained the process. The programming involved the mathematics behind the tool paths. This part will eventually go into a medical imaging device, I told him. It helps doctors see inside the human body, diagnose diseases early. Every component has to be perfect. I did not realize, Jason began, then paused. I mean, I knew you made parts, but I did not understand the precision involved. Each piece matters, I said simply. Someone's health could depend on this component doing exactly what it is supposed to do every time. As the morning progressed, various colleagues stopped by to greet us. To my surprise, many new details about Jason's life and career that I had shared over the years. More surprising still was the respect they showed me, deferring to my expertise, asking my opinion on technical challenges, treating me as a valued mentor. During lunch in the company break room, Walter, the company owner, joined us. He was in his 70s now, but still came in most days. Jason, good to see you again, Walter said warmly. Last time you were here, you must have been in high school. Yes, sir, Jason replied, automatically adopting a more respectful tone than I had heard from him in years. Your father is the backbone of our precision division, Walter said, clapping me on the shoulder. Turned down management positions 3 times because he prefers the hands-on work. But make no mistake, he could run this whole operation if he wanted to. Jason looked at me with new eyes. You turned down promotions? I shrugged. I prefer making things to managing people, and the flexibility let me be home for you after school. The afternoon brought more revelations. Jason watched as I solved a complex machining problem that had stumped younger technicians. He observed the easy camaraderie I shared with colleagues across departments. He saw the craftsmanship in my work, the pride I took in each finished component. As we were preparing to leave, Sophia from HR stopped us. Jason, did your dad ever show you this, she asked, leading us to a hallway display case. Inside was a plaque and a framed article from the local newspaper featuring me with the headline, Local Machinists' Innovation Saves Lives. What is this? Jason asked, genuinely curious now. Sophia smiled. 5 years ago, your dad redesigned a critical component for medical ventilators during a supply chain crisis. His modification allowed us to produce them faster and more reliably when hospitals desperately needed them. The company that commissioned them estimated his design helped save hundreds of lives. Jason stared at the article, then at me. I felt almost embarrassed by the attention. It was just a small improvement to the manufacturing process, I said. Right place, right time. Your father is too modest, Sophia told Jason. That is just one example. He has 9 patents with the company, more than anyone else here. On the drive home, Jason was quieter than before, but it was a different quality of silence, thoughtful rather than dismissive. Why did you never talk about any of that? He finally asked, as we neared home. About what? The patents, the ventilator component, being offered management positions. I considered my answer carefully. I guess I never thought it was particularly important to mention. I do my job. I take pride in doing it well. But at the end of the day, it is just part of who I am, not all of who I am. But you could have been more, Jason pressed. Made more money, had more status. Could have, I agreed. But at what cost? Those management positions would have meant 60-hour weeks missing your ball games, not being there when you got home from school after your mom died. Success looks different to different people, Jason. He fell silent again, looking out the window at the passing neighborhoods. I did not push further. Seeds had been planted today. They needed time to take root. By the 5th day of Jason's stay, subtle changes were becoming apparent. He spent less time on his phone during our conversations. His posture was more relaxed. Once or twice I even caught glimpses of his old smile, the genuine one that reached his eyes, not the polished version he had adopted in recent years. That morning over breakfast, I proposed our next activity. I thought we might visit some neighbors today, people I have not seen in a while. Jason looked up from his coffee. Neighbors like Mrs. Harris next door. Different neighbors. It is a bit of a drive, actually. He shrugged, the gesture now carrying less resistance than it had some days earlier. Sure, whatever you want. We took my truck again, heading to a part of town Jason had rarely visited, an area of modest homes where many families struggled to make ends meet. Our first stop was a small bungalow with a well-tended but simple garden. An elderly woman was carefully watering flowers despite the obvious pain in her movements. "Mrs. Thompson," I called as we got out of the truck. She turned, her face lighting up with recognition. "Brent. What a wonderful surprise." She set down her watering can and made her way slowly to greet us. "And this must be Jason. My goodness, you have grown into a handsome young man." I introduced them properly, explaining to Jason that Mrs. Thompson was a widow whose husband had once worked at the manufacturing plant with me. "Come inside, both of you," she insisted. "I just made lemonade." As we settled in her small living room, I noticed Jason taking in the surroundings. The worn but immaculately clean furniture, the photos of children and grandchildren, the obvious care with which every modest possession was maintained. "Brent, I do not know what I would have done without your help after Harold passed," Mrs. Thompson said, pouring lemonade into mismatched glasses. "That leaky roof would have been the end of me." Jason looked at me questioningly. "I helped repair her roof last year," I explained simply. "Repair, Mrs." Thompson laughed softly. "He replaced the entire thing, Jason. Would not take a penny for it either, though I tried. Said it was what Harold would have done for him." She turned to me. "The bathroom faucet has been behaving perfectly, by the way. Whatever you did, fixed it completely." As we chatted, Mrs. Thompson shared stories about her late husband and their friendship with my family, including memories of Margaret. For perhaps the first time, Jason was hearing about his mother through someone else's fond recollections. Her kindness, her humor, the way she had helped neighbors during difficult times. When we left an hour later, Jason was subdued. "You never mentioned helping Mrs. Thompson with her roof," he said, as we drove to our next destination. "There was no reason to mention it," I replied. "Neighbors help each other. That is all." Our next stop was a small auto repair shop in a commercial district. Inside, a young man in his 20s was bent over an engine. When he looked up and saw me, his face broke into a wide grin. "Brent, man, it has been too long." He wiped his hands on a rag and came over to embrace me with genuine affection. I introduced him to Jason. "This is Tim Carson. Tim, my son Jason." Tim shook Jason's hand enthusiastically. "Great to finally meet you. Your dad talks about you all the time." I explained to Jason that Tim ran his own small but successful repair business, specializing in classic car restoration. "Your dad is the reason I have all this," Tim said, gesturing around the shop. "Taught me everything I know about tools, engines, running a business with integrity." "Brent was your boss?" Jason asked, confused. Tim laughed. "No, man. He was my mentor. I was that troubled kid from the foster system bouncing between homes heading nowhere good. Your dad caught me trying to steal tools from his garage one night. Jason's eyebrows shot up. What did you do? He asked me. Made him put everything back, then offered him a job. I said simply. A job, Jason repeated. Cleaning the garage, organizing tools at first, Tim explained. Then he started teaching me basic repairs. By the time I was 17, I could rebuild an engine. When I wanted to go to technical college but had no money, your dad helped me apply for scholarships, wrote recommendations. Even let me stay in your spare room that summer when I had nowhere else to go. Jason looked at me with astonishment. He lived with us. How do I not remember this? You were away at summer camp, I explained. It was just for a few weeks until his new foster placement was ready. We spent an hour with Tim, who proudly showed us restoration projects he was working on, including classic cars worth 6 figures when completed. Before we left, Tim insisted on showing Jason photos of his wife and new baby daughter. Named her Margaret, Tim said quietly. After your mom. Hope that is okay. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Margaret would have been honored. Back in the truck, Jason was silent for several minutes as we drove. Finally, he asked, "Why did you never tell me about Tim?" It never came up, I said. Never came up. Jason sounded incredulous. Dad, you basically saved that guy's life. He named his daughter after Mom. How does that never come up in conversation? I considered this as we drove. I guess I never saw it as something noteworthy. Tim needed help. I could provide it. Simple as that. Jason shook his head, looking out the window. I do not understand you sometimes. What do not you understand? You do all these things. Help neighbors, mentor troubled kids, save lives with your inventions. And you never talk about any of it. Never use it to, I do not know, elevate yourself. Why would I asked genuinely. The value is in the doing, not in the telling. We drove in silence for a while longer before Jason spoke again, his voice quieter now. Where are we going next? One more stop, I said. The most important one. 20 minutes later, we pulled into the cemetery where Margaret was buried. Jason's expression sobered immediately. We have not been here together in years, he said softly, as we walked among the headstones. I come every month, I told him. Bring fresh flowers, tell her about my life, about you. Margaret's grave was simple but well tended. I had planted perennial flowers that bloomed in different seasons, ensuring there was always color surrounding her stone. I placed the fresh bouquet we had brought, then stepped back, giving Jason a moment alone with his mother's memory. I watched as my son knelt by the headstone, his fingers tracing the engraved letters of her name. His shoulders began to shake slightly, and I realized he was crying, something I had not seen him do since he was a teenager. After a while, I approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. He did not pull away. After your mother died, I said quietly, I was lost, completely lost. I had no idea how to raise a boy alone, how to be both parents, how to help you through your grief when I could barely manage my own. Jason looked up, tears streaking his face. Every night after you went to bed, I would sit at the kitchen table and cry where you could not see me. I was terrified of failing you, of not being enough. I never knew, Jason whispered. You were not supposed to know. You were a child who had lost his mother. My job was to be strong for you, to create stability when everything felt like it was falling apart. I knelt beside him on the grass. I made a promise to your mother right here at this grave. I promised I would raise you to be a man of integrity and compassion, a man who understood that true wealth is not measured in dollars. We sat together in silence for a long while, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the cemetery. When we finally stood to leave, Jason impulsively embraced me, a real hug, tight and genuine like the ones he used to give before adulthood, and ambition had created distance between us. "Thank you for bringing me here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I needed this." As we walked back to the truck, I felt something had fundamentally shifted between us. The wall Jason had built was not completely down, but significant cracks had formed. Through those cracks, I could glimpse the son I had raised, not the facade he had created to impress others, but his true self. That evening, we ordered pizza and sat in the living room, more comfortable in each other's presence than we had been in years. Neither of us mentioned the investment or money. Instead, we talked about memories, fishing trips, school projects, the old Chevy we had worked on together. When Jason finally went up to bed, he paused at the bottom of the stairs. "Dad, yes, son, I am glad I came this week." It was a simple statement, but in the context of where we had been just days before, it felt monumental. "So am I, Jason," I replied. "So am I." On our 6th day together, an unexpected situation arose that would become the catalyst for our most profound connection. We were having breakfast when my phone rang. It was Marco from work, his voice tight with worry. "Brent, there has been an accident at the shop. Dave was working on the hydraulic press when something failed. His arm is trapped, paramedics are on the way, but the machine is locked in position. We need your expertise. You know that machine better than anyone." "I will be right there," I said, already standing and grabbing my keys. "What is going on?" Jason asked, seeing my expression. "Emergency at work. My friend Dave is injured, trapped in a machine. I need to get there now." Jason stood immediately. "I will come with you." We drove to the plant in tense silence, considerably faster than was strictly legal. When we arrived, a small crowd of workers had gathered around the hydraulic press area, which had been partially cleared. Dave, a man in his early 60s, was pale with pain, his right arm caught between the press components. "Paramedics are 10 minutes out," Marco informed me as I approached. I assessed the situation quickly. The hydraulic system had failed in a way that locked the press in position. Simply trying to force it open could cause the entire assembly to shift, potentially causing Dave even more severe injury. "Jason, I need your help," I said, surprising both of us. "Hold these components steady while I disconnect the hydraulic line and manually release the pressure." Without hesitation, Jason took up position following my instructions precisely. I worked methodically, explaining each step as I went, partly to keep Dave calm and partly to guide Jason. "The key is to release the pressure gradually." I explained, my hands steady despite the urgency. Too fast, and the sudden movement could cause more damage to Dave's arm. Jason nodded his focus, complete, his earlier affectations of corporate sophistication entirely absent as he concentrated on the task at hand. It took 12 tense minutes to safely release the press without causing further injury. When Dave's arm was finally free, the relief in the room was palpable. The paramedics arrived moments later, taking over Dave's care with professional efficiency. As they prepared to transport him to the hospital, Dave reached out with his uninjured hand and grasped mine. "Thank you, Brent. Doctor said you probably saved my arm." I squeezed his hand gently. "Just doing what needed doing. Now go get patched up so you can get back to annoying me about baseball." After the ambulance departed, Walter approached us, his expression solemn. "That was outstanding work, both of you. Brent, your knowledge of that machinery just made all the difference for Dave." Marco added, "The way you stayed calm, talked everyone through it. That is why you are the heart of this place." As we drove home, Jason was unusually quiet, processing what he had witnessed. Back at the house, the adrenaline finally wearing off, I suggested we sit on the back porch with drinks. Beer for me, the scotch Jason preferred. The evening air was cool and pleasant, fireflies beginning to appear in the gathering dusk. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the events of the day settling around us. "You were amazing today," Jason finally said. "The way you handled that situation, how everyone looked to you. I have never seen anything like it." I shrugged slightly. "Just experience. I have worked with those machines for decades." "It was more than that," Jason insisted. "It was leadership, real leadership, not the kind they teach in business seminars with buzzwords and flowcharts. The kind that comes from knowledge, confidence, and genuine care for others." He took a sip of his scotch, gathering his thoughts. "All week I have been seeing you through new eyes. The respect you have at work, the lives you have touched, the quiet difference you have made. It is so different from how I have been measuring success." I let him continue, sensing he needed to articulate the thoughts that had been forming all week. "My whole career I have been chasing what I thought was success. Money, status, recognition. But today I saw what real impact looks like. Real purpose." He looked down at his glass. "I do not think I have any of that in my life." "You are young," I said gently. "There is time to build whatever kind of life you want." Jason nodded slowly, then took a deep breath. "Dad, I need to tell you something. About the investment, about everything." He proceeded to lay out the truth. How he had lost money on risky investments, accumulated substantial debt, trying to maintain an image of success among his peers, and gotten involved with increasingly questionable financial schemes, trying to dig himself out. The lakeside development was indeed as suspicious as I had suspected, a last desperate attempt to recoup his losses. "I am in trouble, Dad," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "Real trouble. 60,000 in credit card debt, another 30,000 in personal loans. I was so sure I could fix it with one big win, but everything I touch lately turns to ash." Rather than responding immediately, I got up, went inside, and returned with a folder. Inside were printouts of Jason's credit reports, loan documents, and a detailed analysis of his financial situation that I had compiled over the past few weeks. "I know," I said simply. Jason stared at the folder, then at me. "You knew all of it." "I suspected after finding your credit card statement. I confirmed it with some research. I was waiting for you to be ready to talk about it." "Why did not you confront me, use it against me after what I did to you?" I looked at my son directly. "Because humiliating you would not help either of us. And because I knew the Jason I raised was still in there somewhere, and he would find his way to the truth when he was ready." Jason's composure finally broke completely. For the first time since he was a child, he cried openly, without restraint or self-consciousness. I moved to sit beside him, my arm around his shoulders as he released years of pretense, pressure, and pain. "I am so sorry, Dad," he said, when he could speak again, "for leaving you on that road, for the things I said, for who I have become." "I forgive you," I said simply, "and I am here to help you find your way back. Not just financially, but to yourself." We talked late into the night, making plans for how to address his debt, how he might reorient his career towards something more meaningful, how we could rebuild our relationship. For the first time in years, we were truly father and son again. Not competing versions of success, but family supporting each other through difficulty. When we finally went inside, Jason paused at the foot of the stairs. "I was ashamed," he said quietly, "to come from such simple beginnings, to have a father who worked with his hands, I wanted to be something more impressive, something that would make people take notice. "And now?" I asked. He looked at me with clear eyes, perhaps truly seeing me for the first time in adulthood. "Now I would be proud to be half the man you are." A year has passed since that rainy day when Jason left me standing on a rural road 50 miles from home. Much has changed both between us and within each of us individually. Jason no longer works at the investment firm. After our week together, he returned to the city, gave notice, and began the challenging process of rebuilding his financial life. I helped him create a structured plan to pay down his debt, not by giving him money outright, but by co-signing a consolidation loan with a manageable interest rate. Each month he makes his payment on time, slowly reclaiming his financial independence. He found a new job with a smaller financial advisory firm that specializes in helping middle-class families save for education and retirement. The salary is lower than his previous position, but as he tells me, the satisfaction of helping real people achieve modest, meaningful goals far outweighs the prestige he once chased. Jason visits at least twice a month now. Sometimes we work on projects around the house together. I have been teaching him some of the practical skills he dismissed in his youth. Basic carpentry, engine repair, the patience of creating something with his hands. He has proven to be a natural once he allowed himself to enjoy the process rather than focusing on the outcome. Most significantly, Jason has begun volunteering with a local mentorship program, working with teenagers from disadvantaged backgrounds. Last month, he called me excited to share that one of his mentees had been accepted to college, the first in his family to have that opportunity. "I finally understand, Dad," he said during that call. "This feeling, knowing you helped someone take a step toward a better future, it is better than any bonus or promotion." As for me, I continue my work at Thompson Manufacturing, still preferring the hands-on creation of precision components to management positions. However, I have agreed to mentor younger machinists a few hours each week, passing on the knowledge accumulated over decades. I have also been spending more time with friends, reconnecting with the community that has always been there even when I was too focused on raising Jason to fully engage. Last month, Frank, the truck driver who picked me up in the rain, and I went fishing at Lake Carson, the beginning of a friendship based on our shared experiences as fathers. This morning, Jason called with news. He has met someone, a kindergarten teacher named Sarah, who reminds him, he said with a catch in his voice, of what he remembers of his mother. They have been dating for 2 months, and he wants to bring her to dinner next weekend. She is not impressed by expensive restaurants or status symbols, he told me. She asks questions about what matters to me, what I value. I told her about our journey this past year, about what I learned from you. She wants to meet the man who taught me what real success looks like. As I sit on my back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold, I reflect on the painful journey that brought us here. That day in the rain could have been the end of our relationship. Instead, it became the catalyst for its rebirth. I have learned that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is allow those we care about to face the consequences of their actions, not out of punishment or pride, but because true growth often requires confronting our own mistakes. I have learned that dignity and patience are more powerful tools for change than anger or retribution. Most importantly, I have learned that it is never too late to heal a relationship that matters, to bridge the chasms we create through misunderstanding and divergent values. The bond between parent and child may stretch, may fray, may even appear broken, but with patience, love, and mutual respect, it can be rewoven into something even stronger than before. If you are facing a similar situation with someone you love, standing in the rain of their rejection, watching them drive away from the values you tried to instill, I encourage you to hold on to both your dignity and your hope. Give them space to find their way back. Be ready to welcome them when they do not with judgment, but with understanding. The journey back to each other may be long, but the destination is worth every difficult step. Thank you for joining me for this story. If it resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. I would love to know in the comments, have you ever experienced a painful rejection that eventually led to healing and growth? What did you learn from that experience? Your story might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear today. Until next time, remember that true wealth is measured not in dollars, but in the lives we touch and the love we share.